Good morning and welcome to today's video. It's really humid and pretty warm. I'm riding into London. I'm on the Cinelli. I'm gonna go and annoy Chris at work. I forgot how good riding fixed gear was. Fun! Wait, this is a shiny building.
What one? That one?
Well, this one.
Or that one?
That one's not shiny, that's the opposite.
Good morning.
What are you wearing?
Cycling clothes at midday. I finished bike riding approximately 4 hours
socks,
ago.
Man.
Yeah, my
Nice
sexy
to
socks.
see you.
How are you?
Good.
Yeah?
How are you?
I'm good, man. I'm good. Busy.
How are you?
I'm alright, I saw it yesterday.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. I edited that video and it made no sense.
What did you do last night? Are we out in the dark somewhere?
Oh, yeah, don't tell him. Just you can watch the video on youtube.com/SpotTheScape.
Ah, yeah.
Nervous.
You got to pedal it though.
They need pedals, they are.
Yeah, brand new.
Nice bit of gloop in them, mate. Look at that gloop.
I know there's blue gloop coming out of the thing.
Blue gloop. Smurf gloop.
Gloop.
I'm on your pier.
No, you got a new saddle as
Did
well.
you get it installed?
Yeah, so I can pull the yacht up out front.
Ah.
Appearance for me, I thought that was pretty good. Pretty happy with that. Service.
You do what you want around here. You wear bib shorts.
I don't really shoot.
Some weird. You're like a weird strong man, like an acrobatic man.
Take that.
Steak and eggs. Good tan you got going on there. You're looking pretty lean as well, mate.
Thank you. Thank you. That tan has been there since February. I got 3rd degree burns in February and it's stayed there ever since.
It's probably permanent.
Yeah.
We're in a lift.
They give little gaps.
That's not where Chris hangs out in the gap.
You got a gap over there.
He's feeling autistic.
Me and George were hanging in the gaps earlier.
I'm pretty sure this is the corridor from the Matrix, Chris.
It is.
Where the man opens the door with the keys. And you know what he's just done?
I'm really the only one preaching in a world full of demons. I'm looking for feeling, I'm looking for love. I ain't look for appearance. The one that's appearing me fearing. She'll see all the tears and fears and lean. It's alright.
What are you doing back there?
Hiding from you.
What is that?
It's a slidey thing.
Why is there so much weird stuff? Is George an alien?
Yes. So this bike went from London to Edinburgh to London on one gear, pretty much the whole way. So this is what you want to see, is this really good hack to keep it in one gear. The reason why was because the frame snapped here. So the rear hanger snapped off.
The frame snapped though?
Yeah.
So just a hanger?
No, the frame snapped.
Okay. Yeah, got it.
You have to work with this man, Chris.
But I like working with this man, it's all good.
Sometimes you wear bib tights indoors as well.
It's actually more often it's a rarity that I'm in normal clothes here.
We've only just changed the rules to be not as much lycra in the office, and I'm breaking that rule day one.
George is drawing stuff to tell us off about what training we've been doing.
I've got a phone in my hand, a laptop on my lap and a laptop in my hand, so I can't do much more.
So George, we came here for a reason. Well, I came here for a reason. Chris is just here because he loves you.
I work here.
We want to consult you about some training stuff.
Okay.
Have we been training right? No. Have we been training right for the Rebel time lapse?
Probably not.
No.
No, you probably have, to be fair. Who told you about Sweetspot training?
We have got 2 days to prepare for the Rebel time lapse.
It's 2 days.
That's not long enough to change anything.
No.
But
Well, it's enough time to rest now. Isn't it?
yeah, it is.
It actually is, because it's 2 days away and it's a 25-hour race. So we need to rest a little bit before it.
We basically need to just stop riding now.
Yeah,
So what I'm going to do
cop
is
that up this morning.
ride home and then I'm going to ride tomorrow.
What you guys will look at for actually on the race day is how you're going to race. That's the next thing to look at now
Yeah,
in
good
terms
point.
of what you've been doing for your training. And theoretically, if you've done everything correctly, your training will mimic the efforts you're about to do in the race.
So we've been doing tons and tons of sweet spot training because during the race we're going to end up riding at sweet spot.
Yeah, exactly. So the reason you're going to do that is because you're going to be doing basically repeated efforts. How long a shift are you boys doing each? Maybe
figure about an hour.
45 minutes an hour.
Yeah.
So 45 minutes an hour, as hard as you can, as fast as you can, therefore covering as much distance. But then you have to stop, unwind, and prepare to go again.
Cafe legs.
Cafe legs. But essentially it's like breaking up like 2 weeks worth of training efforts and slapping them all together in one 24-hour period. So the reason you're going to work with Sweetspot is because that's the most repeatable period for you to be in, most repeatable phase of endurance to kind of work in, whereby you're not going to either drop off a cliff on one end and you're not going to be sitting too soft, therefore not going fast enough on the other end. So the whole point about that sweet spot is that you can work in that zone for a long time, over and over and over again, without causing too much damage that you need a proper break. So yeah, you're gonna have a bit of cafe legs because ultimately you're gonna get cold, but you can warm yourself up before you get back on the bike, I hope. Got some kind of strategy for that?
Yeah.
So
Bring rollers.
should be able to get your body back up to working that sweet spot area again quite easily, as long as the last effort you didn't overcook it. And that's a common issue that we see with a lot of athletes in terms of how they train. It's usually overcooking what they're doing. Now the problem with overcooking what you're doing is that A, you're not training in how you're going to race, but also it means that you're causing long-term damage that needs 24 hours, 46 hours to recover from, and that essentially keeps you off the bike. This little chart here is kind of what is how we kind of describe this to people, and essentially what we're trying to show you is if you've got 6 major training zones that you work in, it's where do you find the balance somewhere in the middle of that is effectively your sweet spot. Where can you work consistently day after day after day where you're going to get some gains, but you can get back on the bike the next day and do more work. Essentially cycling is an endurance sport. You idiots are going to do an endurance event for 25 hours. If you push it too hard at any phase, you will be too tired to perform to your best come your next shift, 3 hours later or whatever it might happen to be. So we kind of identify the area of the sweet spot of somewhere where your training...
That's us, mate.
Thank you. Falls in the very top part of zone 2 is where it starts. And it basically goes all the way through zone 3 and zone 4, but doesn't touch anywhere into zone 5. Essentially that kind of middle ground is what's known as your sweet spot. It's a really clear set of 2 numbers for each individual.
What do these mean? These are your training zones?
These are your zones. So this is your lowest zone, this is your kind of endurance zone, this is where you'll be all out kind of neuromuscular zones. So this is where you're trying to do like the bulk of your training efforts. Now, if you spend too long in these zones, if your duration is too long, then essentially you're tiring yourself out. So it's all about finding what's the max amount of time you can spend in a sweet spot so that you can, like I said, get back on and do it the next day or do it the next effort. If you work too hard, if you work too close to zone 5, the drop-off rate of how long you can hold it actually gets quite harsh. So if you're working too much into zone 5 or zone 6, if you're overcooking yourself, your body's ability to keep that up is severely hindered. So ultimately, you won't be able to train as hard the next day, or in your boy's case, you won't be able to race as well in 3 hours time when you're coming back on for a shift. So first and foremost, it's identifying where that sweet spot is, and then it's getting you a sufficient amount of training time in there that when it comes to race day, you're comfortable with it and you can push it knowing full well what it feels like. What we see athletes, the problem they have a lot is looking and finding this area. Identifying it in the first place is difficult. You need an accurate power measure to be able to identify that. But actually, it changes on like a 4 to 6 week cycle as your body is adapting to training load. So if you don't have a clear understanding regularly of your power zones, your sweet spot is not going to be the same as what it was 6 months ago when you did your last FTP test. It will have changed. It will have shifted by a series of numbers. Now, if the sweet spot can be defined within a zone of maybe 50 watts, for every 5 or 10 watts over that you're working, you put yourself in this kind of danger zone here. And the closer you get to your danger zone, that's the damage you're doing to your body that takes recovery time.
We can do that at the end then.
You can do that right at the end, of course, but at the end of it, you don't have to get back up and either train the next day or do another effort. That's fine for the end, but for endurance type sport, to be able to increase your capacity, and if you're working in this zone as regularly as possible, and for you boys at Red Bull, you want to be racing in this zone. If you're racing up here, if you're racing zone 5 and 6 for rep 2 or rep 3, you guys aren't going to be able to go as fast when it comes to the end of it. So identification of this zone, knowing where you are physiologically, so having an idea of how well you're riding at the moment, how hard you're training, is so important. And you can only do that by having a good idea of your power numbers all the time and having a consistent overview of how your power numbers have changed from the start of the season, middle of the season, to where you are now. What else was said about this?
I think he knows what he's talking about. Do you not want to try it?
No.
It's like standing in the power station Chimneys.
This
Yeah.
is exactly the same, yeah.
It is.
I thought you were going to join me as a light grip person.
I've got my light grip
No,
on,
you
but
look like you're from. You look like you're from the real world.
Yeah.
He's a captain on the Nebuchadnezzar.
Am I? Have I got a train again today? Can I have a beer?
Have you? What was your session today?
You're at work
But I can have a beer at work.
because you're in charge.
Because I'm in charge.
Yeah.
I shouldn't have been. No, no.
You've got a serious call.
I've got a serious call to talk about.
We're in a lift. We're in a lift. He's doing like serious stuff.
Yeah, he's on serious call now. Well, it's got serious now. Oh, it's not a good tidings, though, was it?
Good tidings! I'll see you in a bit.
Bye, don't forget
Yes.
bike, don't forget bike.
No, I don't need that. I'm walking.
Don't
Cheers,
forget
mate.
bike.
George is the MD of Jam. They're the guys who distribute InfoCrank power meters and the RevBox turbo trainer and a few other different things. Chris works for the company and they basically help out athletes with equipment and coaching and that sort of thing. George really knows his stuff. I can't believe how quickly it gets dark in the evenings now. I'll catch you guys tomorrow. We're having a bit of a Tour de Friends reunion. See you then.